Hey guys, welcome back to the College Chicks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ashley Thornton. Today we will be talking about something that everyone in college has had to deal with, and that's roommates. I have special guest Bailey Hoffman here with me to give you some tips and tricks on dealing with roommates.
Hey guys, thank you for having me, Ashley.
So we have about 10 tricks and tips that we have came up with together that we think are successful and vital to having a great relationship with your roommate. Number one is respect each other. So Bailey, can you give an example of like a shared space or how you and your other roommates in your college years have had to respect each other?
So, for example, living in the apartments, we all share the kitchen and the living room and the washers and dryers. And I think it's important to clean up after yourself. That way, your roommates don't have to deal with your mess and your guests' mess because it's not their responsibility.
Exactly. That's a really big thing whenever one of my roommates has a guest over and they don't clean up after themselves, and I'm just like, well, whose is this? And like, well, we don't know. Oh, so and so left it over. I'm like, well, that's not my responsibility to leave it over, and I don't like it when the apartment looks like a mess.
Exactly.
Another thing is to be courteous with each other. A lot of times you and your roommate will not have the same schedule, and keep in mind, if say your roommate has to get up early for class or is late or you have to stay up late studying, you wouldn't want your roommate being loud and obnoxious while you're trying to study. And if they had to go to bed early, they wouldn't want you being loud and obnoxious late at nights where they can't sleep.
Exactly. For example, I'm a nursing major, and a lot of times I have to be up early to leave for clinicals, and I try my hardest to be quiet, and my roommates do the same at night because I have to go to bed early.
That's like the worst thing whenever I can't sleep and my roommates know they're not just being courteous, they know and they don't respect me enough not to like have people over being loud and screaming, or whenever they know I'm stressed out and I'm studying and there's being a big mess going on or a big group of people making loud noises. This is very frustrating, and it can also create roommate conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
Another big thing, especially when you live with another person, and especially more than one other person, is to pitch in. Do your part. Make sure everyone is held accountable for their actions. You're only as strong as your weakest link. That's a very famous quote that you hear with sports teams. So, for example, do your dishes and clean.
And that's a big thing for me because I understand hating doing dishes and cleaning up, but it's your responsibility to do what's yours. And if one of your roommates is busy and has a hectic week, you should take on some of their responsibility and also help them. That way they don't get stressed out even more.
Especially what like Bailey was saying, I know Bailey can be stressed out all the time for nursing. So I'm sure it's nice if one of your roommates, say you leave a cup or a dish in the sink because you have practicums and you're in clinicals all week and you have so many tests to study for, and you're just so stressed that the cup and the dish in the sink is the least of your worries. But it's a nice gesture whenever you like every once in a while you just put that cup in the dishwasher or you wash it for them, just so it kind of eases their mind. It's not so much on their to-do list, and it's just a stress relief and helps kind of build like a kind of a bond and just not as much animosity between people.
Most definitely.
Another thing is don't put your roommates at risk. So, like, shut the door. Make sure you leave your rooms locked, windows locked. Don't leave them cracked. Don't let sketch people into your apartment that you're not really sure, and leave them by yourself. Don't put yourself, and your like roommates' things in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm. Another big thing is that can go with don't put your roommates at risk is knocking before you enter a room, which is something that I've always been taught is like before I enter somebody's room, I always knock on the door because you don't know what they're doing or like what's going on in there, and you don't want to just barge in on their own personal space.
Yeah, especially like in college whenever there's so many things going on, you don't really know what you're going to walk into. Also, announcing yourself. I know my roommates, whenever we come in and they've been alone by themselves for a while, whenever they hear that front door open or they hear it knock, we always say, "Who is it?" Because we don't want someone random person like just opening it and having someone random person at our door. That's not a really safe tactic. That's put yourself in jeopardy right there. Number 4 is a huge one, and that is communication. Communication affects us in so many ways. Effective communication can lessen the stress of at college. So, like being able to communicate with your roommate about things can make college a little bit less stressful because it's already a stressful enough time, but having the added stress of a roommate conflict, that's just not fun to add that onto you.
And what goes along with that is communicate with your roommates on how to do things. Like for me, I can get irritated by little things like my roommate not filling up a Brita like for water, and I go out there to fill up a cup of water and there's no water left. So like if you communicate with your roommates on, hey, like next time you use the Brita water, can you fill it up? Conflicts will be resolved before they even started.
Yeah, communication just goes is like one of the simplest things that a lot of times humans and college students we don't really do that effectively. Like, if say you never communicate with your roommate, hey, I have to be up in the early in the morning, and you just expect them to be quiet. You don't really have a reason to get mad at them for not respecting you, like we talked about in tip number 1. Because they don't know. They're just like why they may think you're just trying to go to sleep early. They don't know you're studying. So effective communication is really big. It can nip problems in the bud before you even start it or they even start. Um, Number 5 would be open minded. Listen before you speak and make judgments. Make sure you hear people, but there's a difference between hearing and listening. Hear them. Listening, you can just goes in one ear out the other. But when you hear someone, you take what they say and you kind of let it soak in.
I definitely agree with that because, especially if there's a conflict between roommates, especially with girls, a lot of people just let it kind of sit and boil up. But if you listen to what they have to say and actually hear them, then things will go much more smoothly.
Yeah, like put yourself in their shoes whenever they're speaking. I may not understand why one of my roommates constantly doesn't put the toilet paper on the roll, and I would probably never understand that. But if I listen to them and they give a reason like, "Oh, sorry, we ran out, and I didn't like I forgot to let you know," there you go. It could be open minded about things. Also, number 6 would be flexible and willing to compromise. That's whenever it comes to communication and nipping problems in the bud. Sometimes whenever you go into an argument or a situation with conflict, you have to be sure and be willing to compromise. You may not get everything you want out of this, but as long as the conflict is resolved, then both sides have actually won.
My roommate my freshman year, she was the most flexible roommate that I could have asked for. Like, if I was coming in late to our room from studying or just randomly coming in at a random hour, like, she didn't care as long as, like, I tried to stay my quietest and wasn't bothering her. She was very flexible about my schedule, and I was about hers as well.
It's not all about you. So having compassion for your roommate and understanding you guys help each other succeed is another thing about being flexible and willing to compromise. Resolving conflict. You are living in close quarters. Conflicts are going to happen at some point. You and your roommate are going to not get along. And if you say that doesn't happen, you're lying. And one party's not being 100% honest. There's some things that everyone does that just slightly get on your nerves.
And it's okay to not focus on the blame. You can always agree to disagree and move on from the situation as long as you come to an equal understanding that you guys were both right in your own way but also wrong in another.
Yeah, don't let conflict be the ruining of a great roommate conflict. As a former RA, I saw it all the time whenever I was in the residence halls. People would just not communicate and talk and would let conflict boil up and over and would never resolve a problem to it was this huge fight and they would eventually have to not even be roommates. And a lot of times things can be resolved really simple if you just talk about it as soon as possible with your roommate if you think it's going to matter. A helpful thing that I would tell my residents is you either have 24 hours to say something about it, and if those 24 hours surpasses, you have 48 hours to get over it. That's kind of your time window. After that, it's kind of old news, and you need to bury the hatchet at that point, unless it's something major and big. Definitely just kind of get it over with and get past it, so you don't have to keep reopening band-aids and wounds. Number 8. Treat your roommate how you would want to be treated. That's the general life rule. Your parents and your teachers always told you treat people how you would want to be treated.
For example, if you walk in here and you throw your backpack, your clothes, your shoes all over like your dorm room or the apartment or a house, your roommate's going to expect that that's okay for them to do the same. When in reality, it might bother you that they're doing it, but you're doing it as well. So you need to set a precedent as to how you want things to go. So and let them know that they can follow along and help you, and you can help them.
Exactly, Bailey. Another really big thing is whenever you're roommates, you often share things. So making sure you're taking care of those shared things. Whenever you share those items, like whether that be a microwave, a TV, plates, dishes, treat them how you would want your stuff to be treated. Say you constantly leave the dishes out, or you break a plate, or you mess up the TV, or don't clean the microwave, that kind of sends a signal like, hey, I really don't care about your stuff. So, and your roommate will think, well, why should I care about theirs either? And that can build animosity and conflict, and eventually. Number 9, ask before taking something. That's a big, big one. Like if one of my roommates wanted to borrow something, 9 times out of 10, heck yeah. But if you do it without asking, that's the quickest way to make me mad. If I'm not there and you want to sleep in my bed, ask. I don't care. We're roommates. We pick to live with each other 9 times out of 10, unless you have the random roommate. I know this is a big one with food.
Most definitely. Another thing is like if you're not in the apartment or a room and you want to borrow something of your roommates, it takes 2 seconds to ask them if you can borrow it without causing any type of conflict at all.
Yeah, especially if your roommate has paid for something, like especially food. Food can be expensive too, and maybe they're saving that, or they have just enough for a recipe, and you using that without them knowing can that would make me mad if I had just enough for that one recipe, or I'd been saving that last little bit of ice cream and my roommate had taken it. Woo, those are fighting words.
And the worst part about that is when it's constantly done,
Yeah.
because you never say anything about it.
Or if you take it and then you don't help replace it.
Mm-hmm.
Just you're in a shared space, share responsibility, share things. And last but definitely not least, which is this one's huge. Number 10, get to know your roommates.
I most definitely agree with that one out of everything, because if you get to know your roommates, it'll make living together easier and an overall better experience. With my roommates, I always try to get to know who they were and who's in their life and like who their friends are, and like try to become friends with their friends as well, because it makes living together easier.
Exactly, Bailey. And whenever you get to know your roommates, you kind of understand why they do some of the things they do. So it cuts down on conflict. You understand, oh, I know my roommate Sally has a night class, and that's why she probably had to rush out the door. So that's probably why her dishes in their sink. I know she'll do them when she gets back. And just getting to know your roommate so you also can be there for one another, because college is hard, living with people is hard. There's many ups and downs in life, and especially college, and having the people who you are with and share rooms with, they see you go through it all. They see you at your highest points and your weakest points. They're there for you every single day. And getting to know them and be able to share those times with them is something really important and special that can happen. Another thing is, here's a probably tip, get to, whenever you jump into having a roommate, 9 times out of 10, being roommates with your best friend probably isn't going to work out, especially if one of you is extra messy and the other one's a clean freak. It's going to drive each other insane. So guys, thank you for listening. These are our 10 tips and tricks. I'm your host, Ashley Thornton.
And I'm Bailey Hoffman.
Tune in to next week's episode of College Chicks. Thanks for listening, and remember to stay rad, guys.